This video will show how to create an external security manager definition in Enterprise Server that will connect to an existing LDAP repository instance. This ESM definition can then be used by both MFDS and the regions to implement security and resource controls. Please see the previous video on how to set up a new Active Directory instance on Windows if you don't already have an LDAP repository instance to connect to. So having set up a new instance of Active Directory ADLDS on the Windows machine, we can now configure an external security manager to interface with that. So we're going to add a new definition, and the way I normally do this is to take the information from one I prepared earlier. The name doesn't really matter, but I'm going to call it Jeff ADLDS 2016. Module is MLDAP ESM, always. The connection path is going to be my machine name and port number. Authorized ID. So here we're going to have to use one that's already there. So I'm going to have to modify this to use the MF Reader account at this stage. And what I'm going to do is use add-cedit to specifically set the password for MF Reader reset password. I'm going to give it something I know, like that. Type that in here. The other important thing is this LDAP configuration here. So we have LDAP and base. That's the most important thing to have there. This base has to be the same as where we set it up before in add-cedit, and we had using ADLDS Windows setup tool, we set microfocus program data local. So that has to match there. Just to be clear, we will put these in as well. These aren't essential because these are the default values. If you want to change them, obviously they have to be here. But importantly, things to note, this one here, the user class is the microfocus users and the user container is Enterprise Server users. What that means is that we're using users from Enterprise Server users, and the type of user are going to be microfocus MFDS user. So these are the users that will be able to log in to the system using this security manager. In addition, we want to put this in. Again, this is for clarity. It means that we're going to use the passwords contained in the user fields. If we picked up any of these users and did a properties, we would see, amongst other things, that there is a password set for that user, and that's the password that's going to be checked against when we have that set to mode equals mf hash. We don't need any trace, but this is where you would put some trace. So we do an add. So nothing's really been checked at this point. We've just added an external security manager definition. So we go to directory server to check it out. So we now say change that and select this new definition, and we say add. It says there's already an internal security manager there which cannot remain if another manager reference is added, which is fine. It'll remove the other one, which is absolutely fine. So we say OK. So this is the place to check what happens. If we get the initialized OK, we verified that the configuration is correct and go back to security. Most importantly, we verified that the user and password we put in here was accepted, was valid, was accepted. If we briefly pop over to the journal log, you should see some lines in there saying that the MLDAP ESM, this one here, was initialized successfully and there were no problems. If the user had been wrong or the password had been wrong, we would have got a message in the journal log saying invalid user or something similar. So now we have MFDS currently secured, and it will show it on this screen here that MF Directory Server is now secured by that security manager. However, it's not restricted from access. We don't have to log in at this point. It just passes on through to the security. If we want to restrict admin access, so you have to log in, back in the MF Directory Server tab, we check the Restrict Admin Access box. We say Apply. Now it says you need to supply an existing ID and password with administer users permission or higher before admin becomes restricted. So we'll enter sysad in there. And admin is now restricted. This has gone to the sysad user up here. So now if we have a new session coming in from a new tab to the same MFDS, we find that we have to log in before we're allowed to view the regions or do any other admin work. In addition, once the ESM definition has been created, as well as being used to restrict access to MFDS, it can be used to secure one or more regions. This can be done for all regions by adding this ESM definition to the default ES security tab. Then any and all regions that are configured to use the default ES Security Manager, which is the default setting, will be using this ESM and will therefore require username and password to start and stop the region. Alternatively, individual regions can be configured to use a specific security ESM instead of the ESM set up as the default one. If we go to the Security tab, by default the Use Default ES Security Manager Configuration checkbox is checked, and since we've got a Security Manager set up for this default, we can see in the list that the Security Manager is in use by this region. It's using the default one. If we want to use a different Security Manager for this region, we can uncheck this Use Default ES Security Manager Configuration checkbox and click Apply. This will then show that there are no security managers in the list, but now the Add button is available, and when you click that, you can see the list of available security managers and you can choose a different security manager for this particular region. So now the region itself is secured by this manager that we've specified in the security manager list. So credentials and resource accesses, region start, region stop will all be controlled and validated by this particular security manager for this region. If we now go back to the Enterprise Server Admin Console homepage, we see that this region is using non-default security managers, and the one that it is using is listed here in the security column. The online documentation provides further information about adding and configuring security managers in Enterprise Server. So this video has shown you how to add an external security manager definition to Enterprise Server and how to configure MFDS and or a region to use this security manager definition. Please see my next video on how to use the new ESF admin GUI in ED23 to modify the LDAP entries for a specific security manager. Thank you for watching.